Never did I think there would be a time in the car industry where we would go backwards in the sense of reliability. Purchasing a new car no longer means it's going to be reliable.
You see, I grew up in dealerships most of my childhood, and I remember the service writers and the technicians just being bored, playing cribbage throughout the day, flicking boogers at each other, whatever it was. Now we live in a time that there are so many new cars with recalls and issues that those service writers are just stressed out and full of anxiety.
Chevy V8s are blowing up left and right. Ford is at an all-time high for recalls, and Toyota and Lexus just got done with the largest engine recall in United States history. That makes us have to look at older vehicles when we're looking for something reliable.
Like this Lexus IS 250. The Lexus IS 250 traces its roots back to Japan with the Toyota Altezza, which gave us the first IS 300 here in the United States, which also came equipped with the legendary Supra engine, that 2JZ. However, by 2006, the second generation was born. Lexus redesigned the IS to take on the BMW and the Mercedes directly, as well as every other luxury brand, blending European-inspired styling with Toyota's reputation for bulletproof reliability. The IS 250 became the entry point into the lineup. The choice of rear or all-wheel drive and a luxury experience you could actually depend on. Now, almost 20 years later, the IS 250 has proven exactly what Lexus hoped it would. This car lasts. Owners have racked up hundreds of thousands of miles, and the market today still puts a premium on clean examples. It's a car that represents Lexus at its core: reliability and refinement.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Performance on Wheels. My name is Austin. My dad Todd and I, we make all types of different car videos on all types of different cars. You guys have really been enjoying our older car series and have been showing us the love and support with all the views, likes, and comments. We greatly appreciate that. However, 97% of you are still not hitting that subscribe button. So please support this father-son team and hit that subscribe button so we can continue making these awesome videos. Thank you guys so much. Now, let's get into the Lexus IS 250.
The 2001 to the 2005 model year of the IS is known as the first generation. That generation is known to be kind of the car enthusiast one, a little bit rowdy, whereas when the 2006 or the second generation IS entered the scene, that went all the way up to the 2013 model year, by the way, was known for being a more refined car. They took the GS platform, they shortened it, they did make it a little bit wider and longer over that first gen IS, but this car was about reliability and refinement.
I definitely can see that refinement when we talk about the styling of the second generation IS. This car is truly fantastic looking and arguably quite muscular looking. I've always thought that the second gen IS was very aggressive looking, muscle car like. Maybe that's just because of a reference to the Lexus ISF. However, it just looks great in not only this generation, but going on to the third generation as well. I've always thought the Lexus IS is one of the greatest looking compact sedans on the market. And not only does it look sweet, but there's so much aftermarket support for headlights, taillights, bumpers, grills, side skirts, random small interior stuff. Since they built so many of these, there is a massive aftermarket community in so many ways to truly personalize these cars to look even better than they already do.
So you fully understand the gravity of the comment about aftermarket parts. Not only that, but just parts availability. Let's talk production numbers for a second. So we are talking about the second generation IS, which again, 2006 to 2013, and there are a handful of variations that we'll touch on very briefly. The IS 250, the entry level that we are talking about today, meaning a 2.5 liter V6, came in a couple different driveline variations. You could get it in rear wheel drive, all wheel drive like today's vehicle, and there was also a select few with rear wheel drive and manual transmission. Just under 240,000 total units were produced, with the rare one being the manual transmission with just over 3,000 units produced. The all wheel drive like we're looking at today, just so you know, just over 85,000 units produced. If you go up the line, there's the IS 350, a 3.5 liter V6. Now in total, between an all wheel drive and rear wheel drive variation, no manuals available there were just under 40,000 models available.
I did the quick math in my head. That sounded like we're right around 300,000 units. Is that right?
Yep, spot on. Good. You used all your fingers.
All right, well, now that we're done talking about how many of these things they made, let's talk about why they made so many, and that's because of the engine they put under the hood, because it simply runs forever. The 4GR FSE, the 2.5 liter V6, one of the most reliable engines that Toyota has ever made, with only a couple of small flaws. Let's just go ahead and cover those right now and get them out of the way. The first one, the biggest one with this engine, is carbon buildup. There was an issue with the intake manifold where it basically built up with carbon and over time caused misfires and some other minor issues inside of the engine. How to fix this, how to solve this? clean your intake manifold.
Yeah,
I mean,
change your oil.
Change your oil, clean your intake manifold, keep up on general maintenance, and you have yourself an engine that will literally last pretty much forever. This is one of the most reliable engines ever, and it's paired to one of the most reliable transmissions ever. Either way you go, the automatic, the manual, they both are just rock solid options.
Austin, it's quite remarkable when you look up a vehicle and you're looking for those issues, and there's so few. There's literally, like, that's the only thing to talk about when it comes to the drivetrain, when it comes to the motor. Like, very, very robust drivetrain.
I mean, there's a few water pump things here and there, but all of that stuff that's on the exterior of the engine, like when you're talking about stuff that fails commonly at 150,000 miles, I mean, come on, that's nothing.
Now, when I was younger, the IS 250 wasn't appealing to me, and that's because it didn't have speed, and all I wanted was speed. Now that I'm a little older and I'm looking for a fun daily or a reliable daily that gets decent gas mileage, the IS 250 is extremely appealing. And when you start looking and talking about cars that are under $10,000, getting away from those car payments, it is a super, super hot market. So finding one of these that has a good history when it comes to the maintenance records, they don't last long at all.
No, as soon as they pop up in the market, they sell in an absolute hurry. Now, I know you brought up this thing didn't have much performance in it. Let's talk about that for those that are buying this thinking they're getting something fast just because it has the looks. We're talking about 204 horsepower, about 185 pound-feet of torque. I can't describe to you how minuscule that number is. Under 200 pound-feet of torque is nothing, which helps rocket this all-wheel drive model 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds and a quarter mile in about 15.5. Just an absolute dog. 30, 50, 60. Now, it may not be the fastest car in the world. That is a long gear. But it gets you where you need to go, and it gets you where you need to go even with 140,000 miles on it, and maybe not in the greatest shape ever, in quite honestly some fantastic comfort and quietness. It's very quiet in here. Very little sound is being pulled in from the outside. It's quite incredible just how reliable, comfortable, and luxurious this car feels to ride in, even being 20 years old now, having 140,000 miles. I would easily take this car on a long road trip. It's a very nice spot to be. One of the things I'm thoroughly enjoying is behind the wheel, the steering feel. It's much better than some other Lexuses that I've had. Some other Lexuses I've had are very light, they're very nimble. This one has some pretty good feedback. It is still light, however, you definitely have a better idea of what the front wheels are doing compared to some other Lexus models that I've owned in the past. You can tell they're going for a sportier feel, a sportier driving experience with what they did with the steering in this car. It does hold up in the corners. Quite honestly, none of the models are very quick. Even the ISF was never on top of anything when it came to performance. However, it'll go down in history as one of the greatest engines of all time because of its sound.
The vehicle in today's video is from the Salt Belt of the United States. This car was originally shipped to Ohio, and then it spent a majority of its life here in Minnesota, where we're known for salt. So I always like sharing that when we look at these older cars that have been around for a while, because you can really see the build quality from the manufacturer when you start looking around. The one thing that always stands out to us is rust. Where is the car rusting, showing kind of the weak component of how the car was assembled or finished. This IS 250 with 140,000 miles really doesn't have any rust. I mean,
no.
you can get underneath and you start seeing it on some of the suspension components, obviously. Some of the pinch welds are showing some signs of rust, but there's nothing like any rot or anything major in that regard. That doesn't mean it's unheard of. This isn't an aluminum car by any means, so there is that possibility of rust, but this is obviously a fairly clean example. We do have some faded paint and some clear coat that has completely gone here on the front fender, but ultimately the car is holding up really well. A talented detailist could really make this thing shine.
However, we need to talk about the interior. Coming from someone that owns a C5 Corvette, which is quite well known in the entire car community as having one of the worst interiors in vehicle history, this is the worst interior that I have ever sat in in my life. I have been in so many vehicles, and it's not just the particular one that we are in. Just a few months ago, my fiance and I were looking for an affordable, cheap daily driver. That way we didn't have to have any loans on anything and could continue to save for our dream home. The Lexus IS 250 was one of the top vehicles on our list because of its sound reliability, and it was completely ruined when she sat inside of this thing, because it doesn't matter how long you look for an IS 250 on the used car market, finding one without a dashboard and door panels that are not falling apart is right next to impossible. These cars had one of the worst manufactured dashboards I have ever seen across any vehicle in my life.
It quite honestly looks like a dog used the dashboard as a chew toy, because it's made of foam and the plastic that was on the outside is gone. There's cracks, and this is pretty common.
This is extremely common. There was a huge recall behind the dashboard and door panels on these cars. There are panel gaps galore. There are just chunks of rubber missing. It looks like you do not even slightly care about your car when you immediately sit inside of one of these.
In fact, whoever owned this one looked like they tried to do some sort of paint job that my fingers are sticking to currently. It's really unfortunate because you have this beautiful exterior, this well-designed car. This is a sport sedan. Like, it is sport tuned, it feels sporty, it looks sporty, and the fact that you get in here and you're wondering who's German Shepherd just let loose is kind of the first thought that crosses your mind.
However, if we can get around the dashboard, do you think we can step away from that?
Let's try.
It's hard not to direct your eyes to that. This is a really well set up interior. These seats are great. I am currently the lowest that I can sit inside the Lexus IS, and it's a very comfortable spot to be. However, if you're one that likes to sit low or a little bit like more in a sporty setting, the Lexus IS struggles to do that due to its power seat not allowing me to get any lower than it is. However, if you're one that likes to sit high, you are in luck because you can get very, very high up. I can actually cram my head completely against the ceiling and it still keeps going inside this IS. I have to get back down right now. But you can make yourself comfortable inside this car as long as you don't like to sit low. I did find it interesting. We review a lot of cars. We make a lot of car videos. I think this is the fastest windows and sunroof I've ever seen on a vehicle ever.
If they had power window races, the IS would win.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. The thing goes up and down in like half a second. It's like they attached a rocket ship to the motor of this thing. Outside of that, the steering wheel is great in the hand. The paddle shifters, they kind of suck, but they're fun to use. They're not very responsive at all. The gauge cluster, it looks great. However, the lack of a digital speedometer is kind of annoying and might bug some people on the used car market.
Rev light?
Yeah, the rev light is definitely interesting. And when you get over a certain mile an hour, you have an additional light come up on the left clusters. Now the display, it's dated, it's old, but it works really, really good.
This was actually a $2,200 option to have a navigation system, and that was a flaw when we were looking through the issues to look for, is the navigation system. So whatever, if you find one that doesn't have a navigation system, it might be your better bet on a used market. From a driving standpoint, let's not forget in the second generation that we lost some of the sport feel behind the wheel because the hydraulic steering went away and introduced was the, you see what I'm dealing with here? Introduced was the electronic steering. And the IS, although a sport-tuned car, it is more of a sports car than it is a sedan that you want to put 4 people in. As you can see, at 6 feet tall, getting into the back can be a bit of a challenge with the door sill. And then once you get back here, if you have someone that's say 5'7" or above up front and they want to be comfortable, you're pretty cramped back here. Now, at the end of the day, you can definitely put a few miles on back here, but this isn't the vehicle you want if you're going to have passengers in the rear on a regular basis. Just an incredibly stylish car when you're looking at it. I love the dual exhaust tips on all the models, and you don't use the back seats all the time as a daily driver, but you do use the trunk. And there's a decent amount of space back here. I don't think you're going to have an issue on your daily driving standpoint, but if you have something like skis or something long that you want to try to cram in here, it's going to be an issue because those rear seats don't fold down. But if you did have skis, or maybe if you're just trying to get one friend in the trunk, they could go through this little pass-through because there's just enough room. If you can get past the dashboard, which clearly looks like a pack of wolves had a snack on, this is really a quite remarkable car. Yeah, this one needs to be shined up a little bit. The paint is dull and the headlights are fogged over, but behind that fog is where you start to remember the fun options that this car had, such features HID adaptive headlights. There's the power telescoping wheel, power seats, leather seats that still look very nice. We even have a sunshade in the back that's power, just like the big sisters of the IS, the GSs and ESs and LSs. There's a lot of good luxury touches that Lexus put into the entry-level sedan.
And that is a big part of why they're holding their value today and still so desirable almost 20 years later now. And you can see so many of these on forums with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on, 100,000 miles on them that people daily drive. I've specifically watched videos of people that daily drive these things with multiple hour commutes every day, whether they're delivery drivers or businessmen. These cars have a reputation for reliability, luxury, and style even 20 years later. And with some of those aftermarket modifications that I brought up earlier, some aftermarket headlights, some aftermarket taillights, some wheels, a lowering kit, this car can still look, I would say, very close to modern on the exterior here in 2025. I don't know that there's another daily driver that you can get for such a reasonable cost that is most likely going to hold its value as long as this car that has so much aftermarket support. It really is just a sweet car.
If you are in the market for a vehicle that is under $10,000, we highly recommend that the Lexus IS is towards the top of your list. Thank you so much for joining us today on Performance on Wheels. We look forward to seeing you next time.